Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Robert Baylor, Director of Communications at NUCA. Welcome to this month's webinar, sponsored by NUCA National Partner Tenna. First, before we begin, some webinar housekeeping. Today's webinar will be recorded, and a copy of the recording will be provided to all registrants and attendees. It will also be made available in the next few days on NUCA's YouTube channel, which can be accessed via nuca.com. Now about your WebEx Meetings webinar screen. There are two buttons on the lower right-hand side of your screen titled Participants and Chat. Clicking on Participants gives you a list of webinar attendees. You can chat amongst each other, or you can send the host questions or messages. All participants are muted upon entry. Phone participants can use *6 to mute themselves. Questions will be asked at the end of the webinar. To ask a question, you can submit a written question at any time using the chat feature, and I will read those written questions to our presenter at the conclusion of his presentation. Now let's get started. This month's NUCA webinar is presented by our national partner, Tenna. Today we are going to learn about the lessons earned from the experience of over 1,200 construction companies on construction technology and equipment management. Tenna will share its conclusions on this important component of business operations and describe how the construction industry and construction tech can partner up to best serve utility contractors like yourself. As Vice President of Growth for Tenna, our presenter Russ Young oversees the growth strategy for the organization by working with sales, partners, and customers to ensure success. Russ brings 2.5 decades of experience from Google, Amazon, Oracle, and FMI in best practices for technology strategy, selection, and adoption. He applies his knowledge from these organizations to build awareness and provide thought leadership to the construction industry. He emphasizes the importance of technology and picking the right tool for the job. Thanks so much for joining us today on NUCA's Webinar Wednesday, Russ. I turn the webinar over to you.
Thanks, Bob. Glad everybody could be here today. Glad to see such a full room, particularly in what can be a pretty busy time in the utility construction world right now. What we're going to try and do is, I know we have this budget for an hour. We're going to try and get through these slides in 30 minutes or maybe even a little bit less. And then we'll leave some time for questions at the end and let you all get back to your busy day. But again, thanks for joining us. Bob, you're now hired for all of my my introduction.
Thank you, Russ. I'm cheap. I'm very cheap.
I'll just talk a little bit about why we're here. We'll talk about construction tech. We'll go big into equipment and equipment management as the next frontier. And we'll talk a little bit about adoption and long-term success with tech as well. Mostly from, as Bob referenced, some data from the field. He already gave you a great intro to me. Bob was kind enough to turn off my camera so you don't have to stare at me, but that's what I look like. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email if you have any questions, or I think you'll be able to see the slides in Prezzo. I am going to reference a couple sort of data points from FMI that are from their studies, and I'm happy to share those as well. Just shoot me an email. But let's kick it off. You already know why you're here. First, we're going to talk about the impact of construction technology. And let's just dive right in. At a really high level, and this is from 1,200 construction companies that Bob was referencing earlier in the intro. And what this question is about how do they spend their time each week. And this is a compilation of those 1,200 companies and their responses. What's very interesting here is this bottom part here. And that was 14 hours out of a predicted 40 hours. You please contain your laughter. The construction and utility work is 40 hours a week, but the 35% of those were in extremely non-productive activities, self-reported, looking for project data, equipment, information, et cetera, was the biggest part of that. Conflict resolution was a big one, and the mistakes and rework. What's interesting about this is 35%. In other industries, this number is like manufacturing, for instance, even agriculture. These are much, much lower in manufacturing. These types of studies are usually in the single-digit percentage. So what's pretty fascinating is the amount of money that's left on the table with unproductive labor work. And this is just one of the parts of that study. The other interesting part of this is that the folks investing in technology are absolutely outstripping those that are not. Those that are moving from manual processes to digital processes in general in construction are reporting much, much better numbers here, improved project margins, et cetera. So I would say that's good news, that the overall opportunity is pretty huge. Back of the cocktail napkin math, in utility work, we see around 10% margins. I don't know if that's true for your company, but that's a low end is 6, high end is maybe 15. And then if you can just get this 35 down to 25, with average labor costs around 40% of total revenue in our industry, this adds to a good 2 or 3 points dropped right down to the bottom line, which can be a huge differentiator. But it's not all rosy news. If investing in tech helps us in general, why do we hear so many horror stories? And this was the same group of folks asked this question, but we also asked them, when you invest in tech and it doesn't deliver as you expected, why? And this was their a compilation of what they reported. Poor fit with work process and procedures was a huge one. Low adoption rates, did not integrate well, was a very common trend. Most of the things here are around sort of the implementation phase and tech rollout. And as you can probably see from these, there's a few common trends here, self-reported from the industry. One is that they tend to see a higher success rate with construction-focused technology. This is certainly not a hard and fast rule, but if you invest in tech that wasn't purpose-built for construction, doesn't understand the project nature of our industry, doesn't understand the independent ownership access to lack of access to public funds and what our process is, union versus non-union, vertical work versus horizontal work, and the like, that I guess you'd break this down to someone that doesn't deeply know your problems has less success of solving them. Is kind of the basic premise here. And that's where you see the sort of poor fit with work process and procedures numbers, an example. The other one was single platform. So we saw much higher success rates here with folks that had put together one system. For instance, they were on one ERP or one project management system versus companies that had stitched together a system of systems. And then that leads kind of into the third one, which was mostly around integrations. So places where you tend to see data islands. One of those was construction equipment, which is one we're going to talk about today. Other ones include bidding and estimating and several other areas where you see these sort of data silos and process silos that don't integrate well. And then the fourth one was really around sort of ease of use and customer success, kind of putting a few thoughts there together. But tech, there's a lot of tech out there that maybe you can get it done with 7 steps, or if you do doodle or triple data entry. But the field, the shop, and the office all have much higher success rates when that's a 1 or 2 click type of process, as well as customer success implementation that what the industry terms more of a partnership. If you're working with a company that is a long-term partner to you and is literally contractually obligated to make sure you're successful with their product, those success rates go up. So those were the 4 sort of lessons learned from this study. And again, let me repeat that if anybody would like to see this, there's 2 studies I've referenced here. I'm happy to share those as well. So let's dig into the next step. If this is the sort of short, high level view of being successful with tech in general, obviously the devil's in the details, understanding all the needs from the shop, the field, and the office. But at a high level, wanted to share that. But let's dive into the specifics of equipment management. This is what is being called a little bit of the last frontier in technology, meaning that, I don't want to say ERPs are perfect or that we've got bidding and estimating perfect or project management is perfect, but we tend to now all be on one ERP, so to speak, and most of us have digitized that process. By ERP, I mean all of your accounting, enterprise resource planning. Sorry, I'm a tech guy. Sometimes I use acronyms. Project management. Most of us have consolidated and unified our project management and moved to sort of a digital process. Equipment management is one where there's a pretty big lack of maturity in general. out in construction and certainly specifically in utility work that we want to dive into today. Wanted to share the basic premise of where we see people today. This level one was a concept of where we see really almost a fully manual process. Tends to be companies that are maybe on the smaller side, ones that are less tech forward. But this is where you might see a whiteboard literally with stickers of their equipment that they manually move around, a lot of Excel spreadsheets, a lot of phoning around and actual site visits and need to get to the office. You can see where this is a problem, particularly a problem in COVID as well, that sort of accentuated this problem. But this manual process, of course, is rife with errors. Everything from, where is that piece of equipment? This piece of equipment got stolen 2 weeks ago and we didn't know it. Renting a piece of equipment that might be unused on the other part of a project, missing preventative maintenance windows. The list goes on and on. But this manual process is kind of where we still see a decent part of the industry. Level two is where we start to see some digital process. Or in construction management, maybe this starts with telematics. So telematics has been around for a while, and a lot of folks have invested in telematics that maybe didn't hit all of those 4 success factors that we were talking about earlier. They bought something that maybe wasn't purpose built for construction, on the hardware side or the mobile side, and I guess we see sort of maybe 3 levels of difficulty here. One is at level 2, because they have the system of systems. They might be covering different pieces of equipment, right? So they might have something for their heavy yellow equipment, right? They might have something else for their road stuff, as an example, and they might be using something else for their tool set. And then we see in this process, they might even have stuff that's still manual in addition to that. If you look at utility work, depending on what kind of contractor you are, things that maybe aren't even under any kind of management today could be trench boxes or generators or light poles, Connex boxes and the like. And that list obviously goes on. But there's a huge amount of frustration in that they have to go to multiple systems to manage this equipment. We also see it in terms of what the different users at a company need. What does the equipment manager need versus the mechanic versus the equipment operator versus the people in the office, the accounting folks needing to see that data in their accounting system, or ERP as one example, project managers needing to see that data inside their project management application. And what data they need to see, the equipment operators out in the field wanting a mobile platform that's super easy to use. And then kind of the third level complexity we see here at level 2 is around what you want to get done. We see people buying a system for anti-theft or for geolocation or for utilization or for maintenance and preventative maintenance, or for DVIR and different compliance issues, right? So that list goes on pretty big as well. And so what we've ended up with is an equipment manager that is forced to get by with sort of a systems of systems, a mashup of both digital process and manual process, as well as a lack of connected into their ERP project management. So this level 2 definitely sees some gains from level 1, but there tends to be a lot of user dissatisfaction. And then that brings us to what we call level 3, which is a unified platform, right? So you have all those things we just talked about in level 2. Now you've digitized all that process. You have, all the hardware you need for tracking that's dedicated to construction. You now have a dedicated platform with all of your equipment in it, whether it be, the heavy stuff, the stuff on the roads, F-150s to your low boys and everything in between, your delivery trucks, your garbage trucks, your earth movers, your concrete trucks, all of that, and all of your tools, as well as all that other stuff that needs to be managed well today. So your buckets and attachments, your trench boxes, et cetera, all on one system, and that data presented in a role that's specific to construction, right? What does the equipment operator need versus the equipment manager need versus the accountant need to see from that data? And so all of that on one system is kind of what we call level 3. And right now, we are seeing most folks wanting to and push to get to this level 3. And this is where we start to see some huge benefits that we'll dive into. But then I also want to say there's sort of an aspirational called level 4. And we don't see much of the industry there today, I would share. But this is where we see maybe on the hardware side where there might be autonomous vehicles like a self-driving bulldozer, autonomous vehicles. This could be robotics, right? Like maybe you guys have seen things like TieBot that actually goes in and ties rebar together, or assistive devices that people can wear. This could also be like drone tech or BIM tech, a VDC kind of stuff that is starting to make it into the horizontal and utility work. And then on the software side, it might be business intelligence. Like we're seeing more folks move, maybe from just the ERP or a system being their, source of record to that central part of that hub being business intelligence, be that, Power BI or Tableau or Domo, one of those. And that we see a lot of folks playing with business intelligence. But we also see many companies that because the data that they're collecting is manual and has errors, that really the BI is telling them that they just need to clean up their data more than giving them actionable insight. But that software and hardware side, this level 4, is aspirational for folks. But what we're seeing is that no one can get to level 4 without kind of going to level 3 first. Level 2 might be one that you can skip these days. You could go from a fully manual to a fully one single source automated, but you can't really get to level 4 without getting to level 3 first. And this is a little bit where we see the market going right now, primarily in the utility space. And this is more aspirational than where we are. We see about 20% that are at this sort of manual process and sort of happily staying there, you might say. At level 2, we see about 60% of the market at level 2 with some digital process, some manual process, some but they don't have a single platform and typically not all integrated and speaking to each other. Level 3, we have about 18%. This is probably the fastest growing segment of the market that is trying to get to this single level here. And then this level 4, we have 2% sort of aspirationally going for that, really investing big in business intelligence and robotics and things like that. These are some questions we were going to ask, but because we have the webinar version of this, we'll skip those. Did want to talk about successful adoption of long-term use. Particularly in the utility construction space, we see a ton of feedback because of, I guess I'd say, because of the massive variety of equipment that is used in utility. That nobody only has one or two different types of equipment. We have massive variety of equipment in this field. That we mentioned earlier, that this adoption play is so important, that once you've signed on the dotted line, how do you make sure everybody's getting everything they need out of one system? What are some examples of this? The folks in the field that have a maintenance issue or need to make sure preventative maintenance happens, they need to have an easy to use mobile interface. If they are needing to go onto a laptop to get things done, or have a manual process where they need to say write down equipment hours and send that in, and things like that are sort of rife with errors. And this is one thing we've seen change over time, I would add, that as an example, there are folks that used to go into construction because they didn't want technology. That hey, I'm going to operate a bulldozer because that means I don't have to be sitting in front of a laptop all day. What we've seen change over, say, maybe the last decade is that the vast majority of equipment operators now have a smartphone in their pocket. And most of them now know how to, order an Uber or pay somebody with Venmo or order something on Amazon. I would say COVID, as an example, really even pushed this forward. And so now, we now have an opportunity to embrace tech in a new way, or almost a responsibility in what is now an extremely tight labor market, is to keep those folks happy and productive and make their onboarding fast and successful. And working with technology that partners with you, that understands construction and all the different roles, having that single system, having an easy to use mobile interface, and having integrations into whatever the heck you want that data to integrate into. And I guess lastly, actually has dedicated people, like folks that will show up on site to install for you, to both install the hardware, train on the software, is a big differentiator we see out there. Not third-party installers, not just sending you a box of stuff and expecting you to figure it out. We see as a huge differentiator in success. So this kind of leads to what I call the big picture here, right? Some folks, I guess, in this buying process of updating their equipment management, tend to maybe sometimes get stuck on just solving one problem instead of solving the big problems. You have one person in at the office trying to solve a dollar problem, someone in the shop trying to solve a dollar problem, instead of all of them getting together and saying, what will make our company the most successful and probably the most margin. And the results that are seen, and this is from FMI data, on once you actually modernize this to take advantage of where the industry can be, this data shows a couple interesting points. One is over here, this lower project costs and expenditures over here on the right. Just as an example, in our industry, we see typically around a 20% number thrown during the bidding and estimating phase, a 20% number thrown on equipment, right? This might be different for your company, but order of magnitude. And a lot of folks don't even know what that number is. But when you actually get your utilization nailed down, and you know what you need to rent and what you need to own, and you understand hitting your preventative maintenance windows, and you are stopping theft and all these things, that now very easy to drop this number down to an 18%. And a lot of them are putting in 20, but it's actually 21, 22, 23. What's interesting is if you can drop this even down a couple points, extremely doable, number one, and also drops directly down to your bottom line. So this kind of up levels what equipment management does overall to a company. The equipment manager, instead of being someone who's putting out fires and, oh, this broke down, we need to get one there, we need one of these on this project site, we got to get it rented or get it moved. The equipment manager is now someone who's able to drop $1 million down to the bottom line of the company. And that really up levels the game you can play here when you actually know what your equipment costs are and can manage them and control them. The other part is this lower capital investment overall. The average, say a utility contractor that's doing about $100 million a year, we usually have about $30 million invested in various types of equipment. Again, rough order of magnitude. But when you effectively manage this, and can actually get the same projects done at a higher margin and get it done owning less equipment. Take that $30 million equipment ownership down to a $25 million number, and now you're only having to take care of $25 million. What would you do with that extra $5 million in liquid assets that isn't sitting in the yard underutilized? And that's the kind of numbers you can see from a proper equipment management. I guess I'd put it this way, that we're getting better at managing labor. We are getting better at managing our projects. That equipment is one place where, until recently, we haven't had the opportunity to manage all of this in a one-stop shop. Those are the two biggest differences we see. And so then that goes to takeaways. But let's not get too salesy here on the. But there's. One of the things I guess I'd say when I left FMI to come to Tenna, I got very excited about. I wanted to be at a system that was construction focused, had that single platform, and had proven ability to drive dollars to the bottom line, improvable ROI, and long-term customer success. I apologize. I feel a little bit salesy on that, but what I want the takeaway to be is much like you hold all of your partners that you work with accountable, whether it's in the engineering space or GCs that you work with, or when you partner with folks to deliver projects, or even legal or insurance. Hold your technology partners accountable in the exact same way of long-term partnership in your success. So let's stop there, Bob. We're at what, 2:27. I tried to get it done in 30 minutes. So I think I beat it by 3 minutes. But really, I thought it might be great to give the audience a chance to ask any questions they might have.
Thanks, Russ. That was fascinating. Let's now open the webinar to questions. You can use the chat feature to submit a question to me, and I will read the question to the presenter. Or if you prefer, unmute yourself, state your name and company, and ask the question directly. Remember, remute yourself after you finish. And looking at our chat feature, I have one question, Russ. Do you think COVID has impacted construction technology and equipment management?
Yes, is the short answer. I'd say it's been sped things up, I guess, is what I would say. Prior to COVID, as an example, Amazon was already beating out shopping malls, right? And then COVID happened, and it greatly advanced that. Right now Amazon was moved to even more quickly, and kind of shopping malls went downhill even more quickly. It accentuated a current trend. I see the same thing has happened in construction tech, where maybe it used to be a nice to have that you wouldn't have to go on site to figure out where and what your equipment was doing. And now it became a need to have to actually be able to remotely verify these things. So I'd also say that with COVID, it also drove some margin pressure as well. And that made it so some of the processes we used to just sort of be able to get by with, we've been forced to modernize a little bit. It's I guess put another way, we were already starting to digitize in construction. We were already trying to automate some processes, but COVID made it sort of push the accelerator on that.
Thank you, Russ. Are there any other questions popping up? Got another one. Will the infrastructure bill change timing of when folks should look at upgrading equipment management?
Oh, that's a good question. I would argue yes. And I don't have a magic crystal ball as to when and how the infrastructure bill is going to go, but most of the people I talk to, Nuke has obviously been, thank you, Nuka, for helping, push those agendas forward.
Absolutely.
Important stuff. I would say that probably the closest data point we can look to for the infrastructure bill driving more money in would probably be around the 2009, 2010 timeframe, where we saw more money flowing into our industry and more projects going, which was great for everybody in general. And that raising tide rises all ships. The minus was, those of you that were around, I'm 54, so I was around then, was that it put pressure on margins, and that more people come into the space to chase those same dollars. And that those folks that were good at landing work, but maybe weren't as mature at managing margins on work, they will see greater pressure. And if so, I guess I would say the infrastructure bill is interesting. It gives us a real opportunity to look at the end of COVID and maybe the beginning of infrastructure bill. Now is a fantastic time, particularly as we're, now it's August, but as we're, as we hit the winter here, before going into next year, that now is a fantastic time to look at modernizing these processes. And that investing in tech and investing in process so that we are all a bit leaner and not, that 35% number we saw at the beginning, now is the time to get that 35 down to 25 as an example, so that we can not only win these projects coming in, but also protect our margin and make sure we're making money on these projects.
Thank you, Russ. We have another question as well, too. Let me see if I can delicately phrase it. Can you talk a little bit about Tenna's software that enables these sort of processes to be a bit more efficient, if you think it's appropriate?
Sure. I think I promised I wouldn't do a product demo on this, which I think is very fair, and we wanted to make this very educational. Let me say two things. We are happy one-on-one to help understand what anybody's goals are here, see if we're fit, learn your problems, and take you through a quick demo of Tenna. Just reach out to me or to Tenna. I'm trying to think if we included, email us at discover@tenna.com as one example, and we'd be happy to show you what Tenna is and what it does. At a very high level, Tenna combines a few things. One, on the hardware side, we have all the various hardware purpose built for construction, right? So the cellular based telematics for the big heavy equipment, to the plug-in stuff and video telematics for the stuff you're driving, to stuff to track tools, to hardened metal cased Bluetooth stuff to track things like trench boxes and your bucket attachments, things like generators and light poles and all that kind of stuff, and then all the way down to QR codes that you can use for smaller tools and things like that. And then on the we have a platform that is very user specific to construction, where you can set up projects and people exactly like construction companies look. And then we have a mobile interface, which is primarily for the field. And all of those operate together. And then we've also painstakingly integrated that into all of the other popular construction technology. One of our pluses is, because we're construction focused, we're actually born out of Conti, which had this huge need for their company and then commercialized it. But also needed that information to flow into the ERP and project management. So they understood those pain points. And then lastly, we made a big investment in actual installation trucks and people, actually trained construction mechanics that come on site to both install everything and make sure everything is working, all the data is flowing, everybody's trained up, before we all sign on the dotted line and make sure everybody's happy using it. And then we have dedicated customer success that is free. That's included with Tenna, that you can call for the lifetime of your partnership with Tenna. And all those things sort of together are what make Tenna, I guess, valuable at a high level. Thanks for the question. I apologize I feel like I got a little bit salesy there, but thanks for the question, Bob.
Certainly. And we have one more question that's popped up. What are the best ways to get started? Do you have to go all in to upgrade managing equipment, or is there another level?
Yeah, gosh, these are great questions. I would say you do not have to go all in. The interesting thing, the value of Tenna, or however you would get to what we would call level 3, right, to get everything on one system, fully integrated, is you do not have to go all in. Obviously, the main parts of the benefit are achieved when you get everything on one system. However, unlike, it's very hard to be half in one ERP and half in another ERP, or same with project management. With equipment management, you absolutely can, move all your fleet over and then look at your heavy equipment and then look at your tools and other stuff, or look at it by division. If you're a national player, do it, division by division. You absolutely do not have to do what I would call an enterprise level implementation. I guess I put it another way. You don't have to boil the ocean. Once you get to the sort of promised land is where you see the big numbers of ROI, but you can also see lower numbers of ROI just moving bit by bit. And then, obviously the change management sometimes is a little bit easier to bite off and chew as well.
Are there any other questions? And looking at my chat feature and Q&A, I think that's it. Let's go and wrap it up. We're at the half an hour point. Russ, thank you very much for your time today to present this information to our guests. We would also like to thank Tenna for the continued and very kind support of NUGA and our educational webinar series. Today's webinar was recorded, and a copy of the recording will be provided to all registrants and attendees. A recording of this webinar will also be made available on the nuka.com website and our YouTube channel over the next few days. And thank you for your time today to join us for Webinar Wednesday and for supporting NUCA. Our next NUCA Webinar Wednesday will be held October 6th, sponsored by another invaluable NUCA national partner. We couldn't provide our depth of member services without the help of each of our supporting partners. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and please enjoy the rest of the week.